You open your eyes to the muted haze of an overcast Warsaw morning, sometime in the mid-1700s. The light is diffused like an old linen curtain hanging low in the sky. Your breath fogs slightly in the cool air, and the only sounds are the soft squeak of wagon wheels on wet cobblestone and the muffled rhythm of someone beating dust from a rug 2 streets over. The air smells like chimney soot, boiled cabbage, and rain-soaked wood, an Eastern European recipe for contemplative sighing. You're standing near the edge of a cluttered market square. It isn't grand or theatrical, just comfortably dull. Baskets of root vegetables, questionable sausages, handmade shoes, and loaves of bread that look like they've been through emotional turmoil dot your shoes are damp already. Of course they are. The year is 1752, give or take, and you are about to spend the day with a man so softly strange, so delightfully minor, that history mostly forgot him. His name is Timoteusz Karwowski, and his grand legacy, the thing he was inexplicably proud of, is the candle umbrella. Not an umbrella for you to hold. Oh no. An umbrella for your candle. Now, a small warning. You probably won't make it through this day. You'll either drift off to sleep sometime around the scene with the half-blind cat and the spoon-polishing apprentice, or you'll get emotionally attached to a 270-year-old cracked teacup. Either way, no refunds. Before we begin, if your eyes are still half open and your heart is inexplicably fond of obscure Polish inventors, consider giving this video a like. And if you want more of these bedtime expeditions into the wait, that was real parts of history, you're warmly invited to subscribe.o, and I'd love to know where in the world you're listening from. Let me know your city and local time in the comments, because someone out there is definitely listening to this while baking bread at 3 a.m. Now, let's ease into tonight's journey and follow the clink of tools, the hiss of tallow, and the odd aroma of warm brass. You walk slowly down Wiutajawska Street, where the buildings lean in toward each other like gossiping aunties. The shutters creak gently in the breeze, and there's a cat perched on a windowsill with one ear permanently bent from a childhood encounter with a falling goose. The city is quiet, contemplative, almost as if it, too, has forgotten what it meant to do today. And then, from behind an unpainted green door, you hear it, the unmistakable metallic ping of invention, followed by a muttered curse in Polish and the smell of something recently singed. Inside the cramped, cluttered workshop, Timoteusz Karwowski is attempting once again to attach a miniature canopy to the top of a brass candle holder. He is the kind of man who can lose a full afternoon debating whether melted beeswax drips more poetically clockwise or counterclockwise. He also believes, quite sincerely, that candle flames deserve protection from both the elements and bad posture. He squints at his prototype. It resembles a parasol had a regrettable encounter with a soup ladle. Historically speaking, its true Poland in the mid-18th century was rife with invention, trade, and quiet eccentricity. Though often caught between the ambitions of larger empires, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth still nurtured a kind of spirited stubbornness that made room for thinkers like Timoteusz. Today, candlelight is both necessity and atmosphere. Without it, your dinner is invisible, your thoughts are shadowy, and your potatoes feel unappreciated. But wind, ever the agent of chaos, has no respect for your ambience. Hence, The candle umbrella, obscure cultural tidbit for the evening at. The time, Polish households sometimes wrapped hot bricks in cloth and tucked them under feather beds for warmth. Timotouche once tried attaching one to his back for field-testing warmth theory, but the burn mark remained in the shape of a goose for years. And though no definitive blueprint survives of the candle umbrella, several contradictory descriptions suggest it looked like a hat, but for fire. Historians still debate whether Timotouche was mocking the aristocracy or simply bad at shapes. You lean against the wooden doorway, watching him tinker. His workshop smells of wax, metal, and failed dreams reheated. The walls are lined with failed prototypes, collapsible snuffers, scented smoke tunnels, a wax recycling carousel that spun only in the presence of melancholy. He sighs, sets down his tools, and pours tea into a cracked cup featuring a badly drawn fox. You get the sense he's talked to that fox more than most people. Outside, the church bell tolls 7 times. A reminder that neither progress nor potatoes wait for man or storm dot, and so your first hour drifts by, gently warmed by candlelight, the soft mumblings of a man obsessed with shielding flames and the comforting sense that nothing urgent will happen. No revolutions, no duels. Just you, a bent spoon in the corner, and the quiet tragedy of a hat made for wax. You wake again, though you're not sure when you drifted off. The candlelight hasn't moved much, but Timotouche now has a new design. It looks a bit like a spinning top crossed with a jellyfish. He calls it version 5.3b, morning wind resistant. It wobbles dangerously. You take a seat on a low stool that groans like it has complaints from several generations ago. A faint draft tickles your ankles. This, according to Timotouche, is the enemy. Drafts are to candles what sarcasm is to compliments deadly. Misunderstood and annoyingly frequent. He holds the prototype up with reverence, then sneezes. The umbrella wobbles. You both pause, staring at it. It doesn't fall. A victory. It is now mid-morning. The street outside is slightly livelier. A woman selling pickled herring shouts into the air with the resigned enthusiasm of someone who knows precisely how many fish she will not sell today. Her cartwheel squeaks rhythmically like an off-key hurdy-gurdy. A boy runs past with a basket of laundry and one shoe. You're not sure if he lost it or prefers the asymmetry. Timotouche walks you through the next challenge. Candle umbrellas must not only resist wind, but also not catch fire. This has proven difficult. His last model self-combusted during Mass. He was not invited back, and yet, despite the social setbacks, there's something endearing about his persistence. He speaks to you with quiet pride, explaining the angles, the vents, the flame psychology. He believes flames are shy creatures needing encouragement. Here's your major historical fact for this hour. In 1752, Benjamin Franklin famously flew a kite in a thunderstorm to prove lightning and electricity were linked. Meanwhile, across the ocean, Timotouche was trying to give fire a hat. Obscure cultural tidbit? Polish nobles often carried szlachta umbrellas. Large, heavily decorated umbrellas meant more for style than rain. One noble famously hired a servant just to hold his umbrella upside down indoors, catching imaginary ceiling leaks back in the door. Workshop. Timotouche adjusts a tiny gear on the umbrella shaft. He's added a feature, a rotating tin reflector that redirects candlelight toward your face. He claims it makes reading poetry more intimate. You test it. The light does, in fact, hit your eyes. You feel as if you've been judged by a wax philosopher. He smiles. It's the closest he's come to joy in hours. A mouse emerges from under the workbench, takes a single piece of dried bread, and disappears like a ghost who prefers carbs. By now, your body has absorbed the chill of the room. Timatouche offers you a knitted shawl made by his aunt. It smells like cloves and decisive opinions. You ask, softly, if anyone else believes in the candle umbrella. He shrugs. No, he says, but that's never stopped anyone from inventing. Spoons, fair enough. Outside, the pickled herring woman gives up and eats her own wares. Rain begins to tap at the windows, delicate at first, then with a kind of sideways insistence that suggests a quarrel among clouds. You help Timatouche close the shutters. The candle flickers slightly under its tiny umbrella and stays lit. Abay. Small success. Not dramatic, not world-changing, but warm. And as you sit beside a strange little man in a room filled with metal hats for fire, you begin to understand a quiet truth of history. Sometimes, the most human thing isn't what we invent, but that we keep inventing, even when nobody asks us to, even when it's just for a little flame. By midday, the scent in the workshop has shifted slightly from scorched brass to slightly overcooked beets. Someone nearby is boiling lunch without mercy. The aroma seeps in through the walls, mingling with the beeswax and iron shavings. Timatouche doesn't seem to notice. He's humming to himself and carefully bending a strip of metal like it owes him money. You watch as he attaches a new part to the umbrella's crown. This one is made of finely punched tin, folded in an elegant little curve. It channels the breeze, he says, pointing with his soot-smudged pinky, like a fan, but for mood control. You nod. Mood control by tin. Why not? The outside world continues with its charming mediocrity. Two men are arguing about potatoes, or possibly religion. It's hard to tell in this town. A horse sneezes dramatically outside the window, and somewhere far off, the faint clatter of dishes implies someone else has already given up on invention for the day. Timatouche pauses, his brow furrowed. There's a balance, he says, half to you, half to the fire. There's a fire. There's a balance, he says, half to you, half to the fire. Too wide, it catches wind. Too narrow, it drips wax on your nose. It's an art, like soup. You feel like this is probably the central philosophy of his life. Today's major historical fact wafts in on a strange breeze. Around 1752, Poland's political system, the infamous Liberum Veto, allowed any noble to dissolve an entire parliamentary session with a single no. The system was, unsurprisingly, terrible for getting anything done. In some ways, Timatouche's workshop is more efficient. At least here, metal obeys eventually. Obscure cultural tidbit. A Polish superstition of the time claimed that if you dropped a piece of bread butter side down 3 days in a row, the devil had entered your home. Timatouche had once kept track. He reached 6 days before realizing he simply had a tilted table. He brings out an old sketchbook now, worn and soft-edged, filled with careful diagrams and illegible notes. Some pages are stained with wax, others with what you suspect is soup. He flips to a design labeled Nighttime Wind Countermeasures Advanced. It looks like a candelabra wearing a crown. You ask if any have worked. He pauses, then shrugs. One didn't fall apart for 6 hours. He says with genuine pride. You glance at the candle, still burning quietly beneath its tin umbrella. It's oddly touching, this stubborn attempt to protect something so small, so fleeting. You think, of all the inventions lost to time, devices made not for glory, but because someone believed they should exist. Umbrellas for candles, slippers for chickens, pocket-sized combs for powdered wigs. Someone loved each of those ideas. Probably too much. Timatouche has started to draft yet another model. This one has a handle to adjust the flame's emotional posture. You're not sure what that means, but you admire his commitment. Outside, the rain continues. Puddles gather in the cobblestones, mirroring the gray sky in fragmented little mirrors. A cart rolls by with a flat tire, the wheel giving a sound like a sigh, and still you sit in that cozy, cluttered room where everything smells a little like effort. Your eyes drift to the flame again. It dances gently, undisturbed, under its tiny umbrella. Somewhere in the back of your mind, a thought flickers. Perhaps people, like candles, just want someone to keep the wind off. Time, as it tends to do in workshops like this, has begun to soften around the edges. It's hard to say whether it's late afternoon or early ennui, but the candle is still glowing, and Timatouche has reached what he calls the experimental nap phase of invention. You watch him recline in a creaky chair with a slight groan. Arms folded, eyes closed, but the mind visibly churning beneath his thinning hair. The best ideas, he mumbles, arrive precisely when you can't write them down. He falls asleep 5 seconds later. You take the opportunity to wander the room. On the shelf, 3 broken candle umbrellas, one prototype shaped like a bishop's hat, a tiny bell labeled Emergency Optimism, and a ceramic rooster painted. With alarming enthusiasm, there's also a sealed jar of goose grease marked Do Not Use Again, which raises more questions than you're currently willing to entertain. You flip through his sketchbook once more. There's a scribbled note. Beside one design, to protect the flame is to protect thought. It's underlined 3 times. Today's historical fact wanders in through the dusty window. Poland, during this decade, was teetering toward partitions. Within the century, the once mighty Commonwealth would be sliced up by neighboring empires. It's strange to think that while geopolitical tides shifted outside, inside this modest workshop, someone was worrying about the angle of wax strips. Meanwhile, the obscure cultural tidbit for your brain snack tray in 18th century Poland. It was common to place a single clove of garlic above the doorway for protection from evil spirits and drafty souls. Timatouche keeps 3, though he claims it's for the smell. Outside, the rain has slowed. A young girl with an accordion walks past, playing the same 3 notes over and over, as if unlocking an invisible door. A dog follows, howling in harmony. The city is beginning to dim. Not dark, yet just that dusky, post-tea melancholy where the light seems to lean back a little. Timatouche stirs, mutters something about umbrella mechanics in maritime fog, and sits up with sudden resolve. It's time, he says dramatically, pulling open a drawer full of string, metal rods, and things that might once have been spoons. Time for the weather trial. The plan? To take the candle outside, under real conditions. No glass covers. No cheating. Just candle, umbrella, and the unpredictable embrace of Polish weather. You follow him to the door. He places the candle on a little platform made from repurposed drawer handles. The umbrella is affixed tightly, gleaming faintly with hopeful wax. He lights the flame. It sputters, then steadies. He steps back. For a moment, nothing happens. Then a gust of wind at the flame flickers, wobbles, but doesn't go out. Timotouche gasps, grinning like a man who has just invented socks. You see? You see. The flame dances behind its miniature canopy, like it knows it's being watched. You both stare at it, as if hoping it will perform a second trick, maybe recite poetry or levitate. But no. It just burns. You watch for another few minutes. He pats you on the shoulder with a dusty hand. They'll laugh, he says, but at least it's mine. And somehow, that seems enough. Evening folds over Warsaw like a thick wool blanket, heavy. A little scratchy and probably slightly damp from earlier drizzle. The street lamps have been lit with the usual ceremony of grumbles and long poles, casting puddles of yellow-orange light onto the uneven streets. You walk alongside Timotouche. Now, the candle platform carefully balanced in his arms like a holy relic. The flame still flickers under its tin canopy, proud and unbothered. We'll take the long way, he says, eyes twinkling. I want to see how it handles cobblestones, jealousy, and mild wind from the Vistula. You suspect jealousy. Is a reference to his neighbor, Mrs. Rosalia, who once accused him of stealing her spoon design. You suspect it wasn't worth stealing. The streets are calm. Chimneys puff gently into the evening air, and you pass a few shops locking up for the night, shoemakers, a pastry window with one sad bun left, and a bookstore displaying only political pamphlets and slightly damp poetry. You pass the same. Crooked cat from this morning, now sitting under a window like it owns the building. It probably does. Timotouche pauses beside a fountain with no water. Good wind here, he whispers. Ideal for testing. Also ideal for catching colds and resentment. He places the candle gently on the fountain's edge. Another breeze rolls in, playful, slightly sarcastic. The umbrella flutters. The flame leans but doesn't die. You see that? He says, didn't even blink. Historical fact for this stroll. In 1752, the very first coffee house in Warsaw was becoming fashionable among intellectuals. It was called Dom pod Łabędzim House under the Swan, Bear. The nobility sipped weak coffee and talked in circles about everything and nothing. Timotouche was once invited to display his inventions. He brought a rotating butter dish. They did not invite him back. Obscure cultural tidbit. Poles at the time believed that whistling indoors attracted poverty. Timotouche whistles often. This might explain the state of his shoes. You both stand in silence a moment longer. The city hums quietly, distant hooves, clinking bottles, a dog barking at absolutely nothing with full conviction. The candle holds steady, casting a soft glow on the rusted fountain rim. That's good, he says softly. That's real good. You ask what he'll do if it works, if this umbrella is the one. He thinks for a long moment, squints at the dewis. Horizon-like it's about to offer him a job. Maybe make two, he says. And you believe he will. Slowly, methodically, with more wax on his boots than in the candle. A gust stronger than the others sweeps through. The umbrella tilts, the flame dances dangerously. but then returns to center. The light bounces off Timotouche's cheek. He doesn't smile exactly, but the corner of his mouth seems pleased. "Let's take it home," he says. "She's had enough air for one evening, and so you return, your pace gentle, no urgency, no fanfare. Just two people, a candle, and a roof made of bent tin, walking home through a city that forgot to be in a hurry. Back in the workshop, the atmosphere feels different. There's a quiet pride tucked into the corners now, next to the broken gears and half-used candles. The successful umbrella has been placed gently on a shelf above the workbench, lit and still burning. Timotouche mutters something about needing to name it, but nothing too dramatic. Probably something like version 12, but trustworthy. He removes his coat, hangs it on the bent nail near the door, and pours 2 cups of his usual weak tea. You've grown used to the taste. It mostly resembles boiled intentions with a hint of clove. You sit down. The chair still creaks in protest. A new candle is lit nearby. No umbrella for this one, just a raw, open flame. It seems vulnerable. Like it knows it isn't part of the chosen few. Timotouche sits, stirs his tea, then quietly says, "You know, I once tried to make a bed with candlelight built into the frame. Thought it'd be romantic. You wait. It wasn't. Burned off both eyebrows, twice." He sips his tea. Major historical moment. Well, in 1752, the calendar in England and its colonies famously jumped forward 11 days when they adopted the Gregorian system. People reportedly rioted, shouting, "Give us back our 11 days." Though historians still debate whether that actually happened or whether someone just wanted to invent a more dramatic version of paperwork reform, obscure Polish detail of the evening in rural homes. People sometimes hid coins and loaves of bread as a kind of primitive savings account. Unfortunately, guests often ate them. You both sit there for a while, the silence wrapped around the warm clink of tin and the occasional pop of resin in the fire. Then Timotouche leans back and says, "You know what people forget?" You raise an eyebrow. You still have yours. They forget that someone had to be the first person who looked at a spoon and thought, "What if it were longer?" Or the first to think that chairs didn't need to be only rock and pain. He waves a hand at the workshop around him. This isn't madness. This is delayed genius. You nod, because frankly, he's not wrong. The rain returns, softer now. The kind of rain that doesn't make demands. It taps the roof gently, rhythmically. Like a tired friend wanting to be let in, you lean your head back. The candle on the shelf continues to glow under its umbrella. Another flame joins it. Then another. He's making more. It begins again, bending metal, trimming wax, adjusting lengths with almost affectionate precision. He's not rushing. He never does. But you can tell, he's no longer just tinkering. He's building something that might end up on someone else's shelf. And so, by candlelight, under a roof that leaks only a little, a man invents the same thing again and again, until it works. And maybe that's all invention ever is. The wind sighs through the chimney like it has something to confess. You've been sitting in the same chair for what feels like days, or maybe just a very restful hour. Timotouche is still working methodically, like a man knitting purpose out of scrap metal and second chances. Around him, the workshop glows with a halo of soft, flickering light, each candle perched beneath its own protective little cap of tin or bent brass. Some are round, others scalloped, one shaped quite inexplicably like a trout. He's humming. Again. A tune with no melody, just a rhythm that sounds like patience. This one's for reading prayers, he says, holding up a candle with a low-hanging umbrella rim. Keeps the wax from dropping on your lap during confession. You ask if he's ever confessed anything particularly scandalous. I once told a priest I invented something for horses, but it was actually just a chair with hooves. You nod solemnly. That does sound spiritually confusing. Outside, the street is mostly quiet now, save for the occasional clomp of someone who forgot their errand. The lamps flicker and the light drizzle. Across the street, someone opens their window, leans out, then immediately regrets it. Inside the workshop, it's as if time has melted into wax. The flames are small, gentle things, each encased in its armor of absurdity. One umbrella twirls slightly when the door creaks open by accident. Timotuz insists, but you suspect otherwise. Historical moment for this sleepy scene. Around this same year, a young Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart is just starting to play the clavier. Meanwhile, here in Warsaw, a man is quietly staging a candlelight revolution with no audience and no piano. Obscure cultural tidbit. It was not uncommon in this era for Polish townspeople to wear belts made of braided horsehair, thought to ward off kidney ailments. Timotuz wears one not for health, but because he once ran out of twine. He claims it builds character. It mostly builds itching. You walk over to one of the newer candle umbrellas. This one has little cutouts in the rim stars and moons punched into the metal. The light filters through in tiny constellations, dappling the wall with sleepy galaxies. Timotuz watches you quietly. That one's for children, he says, so the shadows won't scare them. You think of children waking up in the dark, the flickering shapes on the wall, the way a single small light can make the unknown seem friendly. You think of a man who made this for someone who might never know his name. Did any of these ever sell? You ask. He shrugs. Once to a woman who thought it was a hat for her parrot. Well, success comes in many feathers. The workshop is warm now. Not hot, just gently, comfortingly warm. A lived-in warmth, the kind that smells like old brass and stale tea and a dozen unspoken ideas. And as Timotuz leans over his next design, this one featuring a spring-loaded shade, for drama, you realize that you've stopped thinking about time. There is only this room, this moment, this man, and the light that keeps on burning. The clock chimes once, from somewhere deep in the belly of the house, like it's trying not to wake anyone. The candlelight has grown softer lower, somehow. Or maybe your eyes are just adjusting to a world that doesn't need brightness to be seen. Timotuz is lying on his back now, hands folded on his chest, staring at the wooden beams above like they owe him an explanation. You're still seated, legs tucked under, listening to the creak of the floorboards cooling. I once dreamed of fire, he says suddenly. Not destructive, just big, towering, like it wanted to say something but only knew how to glow. You nod, unsure how to respond. This is not the sort of man you interrupt mid-poetic combustion. He turns his head toward you. You ever think a candle just wants to be taken seriously? You think about it. Maybe, you say, but only until it burns out. He grins. Exactly. Tonight's major historical moment flickers from the shadows. Around this time, Warsaw's royal castle is being refurbished with new art and tapestries arriving from across Europe. High ceilings, velvet drapes, oil paintings the size of small horses. None of them, you suspect, have ever seen a candle umbrella. Obscure cultural note, some Polish households in the 18th century believed that ringing a small bell before sleep could ward off nightmares. Timoteusz has one, though he admits he mostly uses it to remind himself where he put his other bell. He's sketching again. This one is absurdly tall, like a chimney hat balanced on a thimble. This, he announces, is the long-range edition for windy stairwells and judgmental ants. You ask him if he's tired. He considers. Of failure, no. Of gravity, yes. And somehow that makes perfect sense. Outside, a cat yowls at something invisible, perhaps a ghost. Perhaps its own reflection. Perhaps the ghost of its reflection. Timoteusz sips the last of his tea and stands, joints popping like old floorboards. Want to see the archive? He asks. You follow him to the back of the workshop, where a low door leads into a narrow storage room. Shelves upon shelves of candle umbrellas, failed ones, experimental ones, a few made from lace, one apparently crafted from the remains of an accordion. Each has a tag. Too loud, too fast, too curly, excellent but unwelcome. It's less a collection of rejects and more a museum of dreams that didn't feel like cooperating. He looks at them fondly. They weren't wrong, he says, just early. You both stand there in silence, surrounded by tin and wax and wild ideas. And suddenly you understand something small but important. Invention isn't just about making things work. Sometimes it's about making things exist, even if they wobble, even if they drip, even if nobody buys them but a parrot enthusiast from Krakow. The flame in the main room still glows. It hasn't gone out. Not once. And in this place, on this quiet evening that feels like the beginning of something, you return to the front room with the slow, careful footsteps of someone trying not to disturb sleeping thoughts. The workshop is quieter now, thick with the kind of silence that only comes after a long, oddly important evening. Timoteusz stands near the table, turning the candle gently, as if showing it a new angle of the world. The umbrella, though slightly tilted, has held through every draft, sneeze, and breeze. The flame inside glows warmly, with the quiet confidence of something that has outlived its criticism. I think this one's ready, he says, for real-world use. You raise an eyebrow. Wasn't the real world out there? He waves dismissively. The outside world is rude. This one's for inside people lighting candles for memory, for prayer, for not tripping over their cat in the dark. A noble cause, honestly. The tea kettle wheezes once more, and you both settle in for one last cup. This time, the flavor leans slightly toward lavender, possibly by accident. Tonight's historical context sneaks in gently. In the same decade, Poland's famed Commission of National Education would soon be formed, arguably the first ministry of education in Europe. While minds were busy building systems of learning, Timoteusz was teaching candlelight how to stay calm. Obscure cultural tidbit. Some Polish families believed beeswax candles carried the prayers of the dead more reliably than tallow, which may Explain why Timotouche only uses beeswax for his ceremonial umbrellas. You ask him what happens if the prayers are too heavy. He just blinks. Then you add a second umbrella. You help him gently wrap the umbrella candle in a bit of cloth. The plan? To walk it over to a neighbor's home, one Mrs. Wincentina, who holds small vigils for her late husband every Thursday night, whether she remembers it's Thursday or not. Her cat once ate my notes, he says fondly. So I owe her. The streets are still damp but peaceful. Lamps glow like scattered marigolds along the road. You pass a sleeping dog wearing a scarf, a silent shoemaker closing his shutters, and a large pile of cabbage sitting outside a door like it's waiting to be let in. Mrs. Wincentina answers her door in slippers shaped like loaves of bread. Her eyes go wide at the sight of the candle. Oh, she says. It has a hat, Timotouche beams, for your prayers, windproof. She looks at it for a long moment. Will it work if I forget what I was praying about halfway through? No promises, he says, but it'll keep the flame going until you remember. She takes it in both hands as if it might whisper to her. The flame dances warm and unbotthered. She thanks him with a plate of oddly square cookies and a jar of pickled something. You do not ask what. You simply accept. Back in the workshop, Timotouche sighs. That was good. You nod. One down. How many to go? He glances at the shelf. 17 prototypes, 7 ideas, 3 pieces of lace, a half-finished spoon. He stretches. Plenty. And somehow that's comforting. You wake to soft gray light filtering through the slats in the wooden shutters. It's morning again, or maybe the same one just circling back around. The air is cool, tinged with the scent of wet wood, old smoke, and optimism reheated. Timotouche is already awake, of course. He's perched at the table with a scrap of parchment and a particularly rebellious gear that refuses to do as it's told. He looks up. I had an idea in my sleep. It was either for a self-snuffing candle or a jacket that whistles when you're thinking too hard. I didn't write it down. Now it's both. You take a moment to wash your face in the chipped ceramic basin near the window. The water is brisk enough to inspire reflection. Outside, the city stirs gently, a broom sweeping stone. A woman negotiating with a very defiant chicken. A cart full of turnips squeaking its way toward forgettability. Timotouche presents a new prototype. A candle umbrella made of stretched parchment sealed with beeswax. Light as paper, he says, because it is paper. You ask about the fire risk. Acceptable, he replies. If you like drama. Historical fact of the morning. At this time, the Enlightenment is spreading across Europe. Scientific thought, reason, and intellectual salons are blossoming. Meanwhile, in this little Warsaw workshop, a man is testing paper roofs for tiny flames. And honestly, it feels equally important. Obscure cultural tidbit. Many Polish households of the time placed a dish of salt at the entrance, not for seasoning but to absorb bad energy from guests. Timotouche keeps one out of habit, though it occasionally doubles as an ashtray. You sit with him for a while, watching the morning unfold. He hands you a small candle, one of his earliest attempts. It's crooked, the wax uneven, and the umbrella slightly off-center. You can keep that one, he says. For when the power goes out in your mind, you light it. The flame flickers under its imperfect shield. steady but imperfect, kind of like Timotouche himself. He brings out a list next. Names, all handwritten. You recognize a few neighbors. The priest, the man with the accordion, the woman who smells like cinnamon and scowls like thunder. What's that? You ask. People who could use a little light, he replies. I figure. If I make one for each, maybe they'll stop thinking I'm odd. You raise an eyebrow. Okay, he admits. Maybe one of them will stop thinking I'm odd. You spend the rest of the morning sorting bits of tin, trimming wicks, and folding absurdly small hoods for candlelight, each one different. Each one destined for someone who doesn't know they need a dot. And as the sun finally breaks through the clouds outside, you realize something you hadn't before. This isn't just about protecting Flame Dot, it's about offering light, even when nobody asks for it. The sun is high now, lazily baking the rooftops of Warsaw with all the commitment of a candle warming an attic. In the workshop, it's the golden hour of invention, not because anything is actually being invented, but because everything glows just enough to make failure look like charm. Timotouche is working with great intensity, which, in his case, involves humming tunelessly, holding two unrelated objects together, and staring at them until one of them makes a confession. You're helping, sort of. Mostly by sorting his collection of umbrella parts, small domes of beaten brass, tin cutouts shaped like clouds, a fragile canopy made from stitched linen and hardened lard, prototype for windy kitchens. Today's the day, he says suddenly. The day we test the walking model. You freeze mid-sort. Walking? He pulls out a candle mounted on a base with 3 wobbly legs and a wind-up mechanism. It walks, he says, very slowly, very nervously, like an old priest late for confession. You wind the crank. The candle shuffles forward, umbrella, gently bobbing. It makes it halfway across the table before tripping over a pencil and surrendering entirely. It's a metaphor. Timotouche says solemnly. Outside, the city clatters with midday purpose. Carriages roll by with dusty flair. Market voices swell and fade. A dog barks at its own echo. Someone is loudly selling turnips again. Or possibly just yelling about them. Historical fact for this hour. King Augustus III of Poland was on the throne during these years, though on the throne is doing a lot of heavy lifting. He was famously disinterested in ruling, preferring hunting and music over politics. Historians still debate whether his detachment was a symptom of broader dysfunction or simply the result of a really excellent cheese seller. Obscure Polish cultural tidbit. To chase away illness, some people would whisper their symptoms into a hollow tree. Timotouche once did this with a broken heart. The tree, for what it's worth, did not offer advice, but he claims it looked sympathetic. You and Timotouche spend the next hour adjusting gears, trimming wicks, testing umbrellas under increasingly absurd conditions. One candle is placed under a sieve, another beneath a soup bowl with air holes, another beneath the lid of a teapot. You begin to realize something peculiar. He doesn't test to find the best version. He tests because each one deserves its chance. Even the ridiculous ones. Especially the ridiculous ones. The walking candle has since made it halfway across the room. It is now stuck in a knot in the floorboards and appears to be rethinking its life choices. Timotouche kneels beside it. Keep going, he whispers. Don't let the wood define you. You're not sure if he's encouraging the candle or himself. Later that afternoon, a delegation of sorts arrives. A girl from the bakery, a pipe-smoking tailor with a limp, and Mrs. Rosalia Spoon, critic and unofficial queen of the block. They've come, it seems, because word of the hat candles has spread, or maybe they're just bored. It's hard to say. Timotouche panics briefly. He hasn't prepared a presentation or a tray of anything edible, but he does have a basket of unfinished prototypes and a strong sense of whimsy. He lines them up on the table. This one deflects. Drafts from the left. That one calms aggressive flickering. This one is purely decorative and probably illegal in 3 provinces. The girl from the bakery giggles. Mrs. Rosalia squints, then mutters something about over-designed saucepans. The tailor is quietly taking notes or doodling trousers. Timotouche lights each candle one by one. The room begins to glow with an inconsistent but deeply sincere sort of light. Some umbrellas cast lovely star-shaped shadows. One emits a faint hum, which might be beeswax fermentation. He pauses in front of the walking candle. This one hasn't decided yet. Historical fact for this little social gathering: the Polish Lithuanian Commonwealth had one of the largest armies in Europe on paper during this time. In practice, however, most soldiers were unpaid and frequently borrowed horses. The army often looked more like a very determined parade, obscure cultural gem, to protect their homes. Polish villagers sometimes buried frog skeletons under the doorstep. No one really agrees why. Timotouche has one, but he insists it's just a coincidence. Mrs. Rosalia leans close to one candle with a swirling copper canopy. This one, she says slowly, reminds me of my late husband's toupee. Timotouche bows. An honor. The tailor asks for 2 to take home, one for his wife, who reads by windowlight, and one for himself, to make the pipe look more dramatic. The bakery girl just wants the one that flickers like a heartbeat. And suddenly, it's real. People want these, not for utility, not because they're brilliant, but because they're strange and warm, and quietly full of care. When they leave, carrying little flames in trembling umbrellas, Timotouche stands very still. You ask how he feels. He doesn't answer, but his eyes are glassy and his hands are still. Invention, it seems, doesn't always announce success. Sometimes it just glows back at you. The evening drapes itself over the city like an old velvet coat, soft, worn and slightly frayed at the seams. You and Timotouche are back in the workshop, which now feels a little less like a den of private madness and a little more like an artist's gallery. The shelves are still cluttered, the floor still sticky in places, but there's a quiet shift in the air. The prototypes are no longer just personal obsessions. They're emissaries, survivors, tiny, flickering diplomats of a peculiar sort of hope. Timotouche is writing something, a label. You think on a strip of paper with wax-smudged fingers. His penmanship is awful. Possibly an artistic choice. What's it say? You ask. He squints at it. I think it says candle, no. 7. Recipient unknown, or possibly carp noodle safety hat. I'll know when I find the right person. The room is lit by a dozen tiny umbrellas now, their soft light pooling across the wooden floor. One flickers each time someone breathes too loudly. Another rotates gently, like it's trying to catch a better breeze. You pick up the smallest one. just big enough to shield the flame of a stubby tea light. Its umbrella is made from bent silver cutlery, 2 spoons, and a butter knife, welded with care and maybe some underlying childhood trauma. Historical moment of the hour in this same decade. Polish nobility began to send their sons to Paris and Vienna to be properly educated. These young men returned fluent in French, lovers of opera, and entirely incapable of chopping wood. Historians still debate whether this helped or hindered the nation's decline. Obscure cultural tidbit. Some believed placing a dried apple under your bed would protect you from heartbreak. Timatush tried this once. The heartbreak stayed. The apple fermented. He gestures to a blank spot on the shelf. That's where yours will go, he says. You've earned one. You raise an eyebrow. I haven't invented anything. He shrugs. Neither did most kings, but they still got chairs. So you help him build it, your candle, your umbrella. You choose the parts, a gear from a broken clock, a button from his old waistcoat, a circle of cut tin polished to a near reflection. The result is absurd. Delightfully, irredeemably absurd. It tilts, it wobbles. But it stands. He lights it. The flame holds, slightly smug. There, he says. Now you're part of the story. And as the candle glows beside its kin, you realize you've been inducted into a very quiet revolution. One where fire isn't conquered, just gently persuaded. Sleep is starting to wrap its gentle fingers around the edges of your thoughts. The workshop is quieter, now just the occasional creak of cooling timber and the soft hiss of wax meeting flame. Timatush moves slowly through the room, adjusting umbrella angles as if they're tiny satellite dishes aimed at the soul. He sets one on the windowsill, another near the door. These are for the night, he murmurs. Guardians, you smile. I thought they were just silly hats for candles. Same thing, he replies. He lights one final candle, an older one, with a dented copper shade that casts wide, sleepy arcs of light across the ceiling. It flickers slowly, like a lullaby that forgot the words but remembered the tune. Historical. Note for your winding mind. Poland's partition treaties are just around the historical corner. Soon, the map will be redrawn by foreign hands, and many of these quiet streets will become someone else's problem. But for now, here, inside this candlelit room, the world still belongs to stubborn inventors and half-finished dreams, obscure. Detail whispered like an old memory. In parts of rural Poland, people believed that if you fell asleep holding a piece of silver, you'd dream of the person you were meant to marry. Timatush once tried it with a spoon and dreamed of himself in a mirror. He didn't try again. He settles into his chair with a long sigh, bones cracking in a chorus of resignation. I've done good work, he says, not proudly, but like someone who finally finished folding laundry after a decade of war. You ask what's next. He stares at the ceiling. Maybe something for shoelaces. Or for people who forget where they put their longing. You nod. That's a market. The flames dim slightly. Outside, a light fog creeps in, blurring the edges of street lamps and softening the edges of the world. Warsaw sleeps. The pigeons tug their heads under wings. The bakers dream of risen dough. The frogs, skeletal or otherwise, remain respectfully silent. And inside this little workshop, surrounded by tiny umbrellas and flickering light, you feel something strange, not safe, not in the grand armored way. Not like a castle, but like a flame that knows someone is looking out for it. You close your eyes. You feel the warmth of your own ridiculous candle on your cheek, and you let the world go quiet, mourning. Again, pale and tentative, like it's asking permission to return. Light slips through the shutters in streaks of dusty gold, catching the curls of smoke still rising from the last few candle stubs. The fire in the hearth has gone out, but its ghost lingers in the air, ash and warmth, comfort and fatigue. Timotouche is awake, of course. He never really sleeps. He just folds himself into a shape that looks like rest and lets the night drift over him like varnish. He's already dressed, his waistcoat buttoned wrong by one, holding a dented spoon and staring at it like it might provide direction. New idea, he mutters. What if the umbrella adjusted itself based on mood? You blink. Whose mood? Yours or the candle's? Whoever speaks first. You suspect he's joking, but the way he's scribbling suggests otherwise. The workshop is a little brighter now. Not in wattage, just in purpose. A few candles from yesterday still stand where they were gifted. The walking model is parked in a corner, legs crossed in resignation. The spoon-shaped one is burning softly on a shelf above a stack of mislabeled diagrams. You sip warm water with a leaf floating in it. Timotouche insists it's tea. Today's final historical whisper. Just a few years from now, Poland will undergo the first of its infamous partitions, carved up like forgotten pie by Hungary. Neighbors. The idealism of the Commonwealth, the debates and reforms, will be squashed beneath boots and signatures. But that's later. Right now, in this warm little room, a man is adjusting the curve of a candle. Umbrella to protect a stranger's evening prayers. Obscure cultural detail to round out our collection. Some believe that candles made by hand and lit with intention could carry blessings through the smoke. Timotouche never says he believes this, but he always lights the wick with both hands. You help him pack a small crate, 4 finished umbrellas, folded neatly with instructions written in poetic riddles. One is for the priest, one for the angry baker, one for a child who's afraid of thunder, and one, Timotouche says, is for someone I haven't met yet, but already like. He seals the crate with a wax stamp shaped like a tiny flame. He looks at you then. You know, he says, none of this was meant to be useful. You smile. That explains everything. I just wanted to protect something gentle. Something that flickers. You nod. Because now you understand. Sometimes you build absurd little machines not to change the world, but to say, quietly, that you noticed its softness. Outside, Warsaw stirs again. The fog lifts. A man sings off-key while delivering bread. Someone argues with a goose. The sun takes its time climbing over the chimney tops. You say your goodbyes. He waves vaguely, already halfway through a drawing of what might be a wearable umbrella for melancholy. You step out into the street, the sky pale blue and full of secrets. Your candle, tucked in your coat, burns steadily beneath its tiny shelter. And for once, the wind doesn't mind. And now, your journey winds down. The workshop fades behind you, its crooked windows glowing like warm eyes in the quiet of morning. The soft patter of steps on old cobblestone gives way to nothing at all. Just air, just hush, just the peaceful sleepy pull of an ending that doesn't need applause. The candle in your coat glows gently. It warms your ribs. Not hot, just enough to feel noticed. Above it, the umbrella wobbles slightly with each breath you take, a gentle reminder that even flickering things deserve shelter. You walk past shuttered shops. A cat follows briefly, then changes its mind. Somewhere in the distance, a bell rings. With no urgency at all, the city is a blur of rooftops and quiet ambition. The kind of ambition that doesn't ask for recognition, just one more day, one more idea, one more strange little invention no one really asked for, but someone might quietly need. The sky brightens slowly, like it's remembering how. The air is soft around your fingers. You imagine the sun as just another candle one that doesn't need an umbrella because the whole sky protects it. And maybe, just maybe, you're starting to feel a little like that flame small, persistent, protected. You. Settle in now, wherever you are, curled under a blanket or stretched out beneath a low ceiling of starlight. Your eyes are heavy, your breath slow. The world outside has gone wonderfully quiet. They made it to the end. Or close enough to stop counting. So let your shoulders fall. Let your thoughts drift. Let the wind pass, and let the flame inside you flicker, steady, safe, under its absurd little umbrella. Good night.